Good morning. Welcome to Matter. I am Stephen Collins. I'm the CEO of Matter. Really appreciate you all being here. In a nutshell, what we do at Matter, we essentially do three things. We incubate startups. We have about 230 companies who are members of Matter. They are all over the world. They range from early stage companies really working on their product market fit to companies that are growth stage and really accelerating their trajectory into the market. And we have a suite of services to help them. We have a curriculum with about 100 classes in it. We have mentoring programs. We help them raise money. We really try to help them with every aspect of growing their businesses, from ideation all the way through to scaling up into the market. Second thing we do is work with big companies, large health systems, insurance companies, companies such as Novo Nordisk, and we help them innovate. We become a part of their innovation teams, or an extension of their innovation teams, to help them source and co-develop solutions. We help them tackle complex problems, usually relating to the integration of technology and the opportunity technology presents to accelerate their business and help achieve their objectives. And we help as they transform their organizations to be more entrepreneurial, more nimble, more digitally focused organizations. And then the third thing we do is we're a nexus for the healthcare community. We believe fundamentally in the power of convening and in collaboration and bringing people together who don't normally intersect over the course of a day to think about together, to be inspired by, to be educated around topics related to healthcare innovation, healthcare technology, and the evolution of health and healthcare. So this morning, we have an event. We're going to have a conversation focused on sustainability in healthcare with one of the leaders from Novo Nordisk, who's flown in from Copenhagen last night for this program. We recently launched our second Novo Nordisk Innovation Challenge, where you're going to hear a lot more about that, but where we're working with the company to help them achieve their environmental objectives. And Kenneth Strømdahl is our partner in this adventure, who flew in last night from Copenhagen. He spent a number of years in the Danish Army before joining Novo Nordisk. He's an engineer by training, and he leads device R&D for the company. And for the next 55 minutes or so, we're going to have a conversation about Novo Nordisk's view, Novo Nordisk's position on sustainability, how they work with entrepreneurs, what they're looking for as they look to achieve their environmental objectives. We're using matter.socialqa.com for questions. So if you have questions for Kenneth, go on your phones, go to matter.socialqa.com. You can ask your questions. You can see what other people have asked. You can vote on those questions, and I will weave those into the conversation. So with that, please welcome Kenneth Strømdahl.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. We always greet like that. Good to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
So for those of us, or those people here who aren't intimately familiar with Novo Nordisk, tell us a little bit about the company.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here together with you again, Stephen, and it's really cool to see all of you here. It's such an amazing place you have here in Chicago, and not least also that I just met Dan. He was here among us today, and he was one of our finalists from our competition that we were running together with you last year. So good to see how you keep the network and all the startup companies nurturing them in the society. But just a brief introduction to Novo Nordisk. What are we as a company? Now that we are talking sustainability, I think you should have just a very brief background. We are a global pharmaceutical company. We are providing life-saving drugs for people suffering from a chronic disease, mainly being diabetes. And we have, of course, a global reach today. We are a company which has more than 40,000 employees We are selling our drugs in more than 170 countries across the globe. So given these circumstances, we of course also know that we have a certain impact when we talk sustainability and environment. So yeah, I think that was just a brief introduction.
Yep. So sustainability, let's start with a basic question. What is your definition of sustainability, and particularly in the context of Novo Nordisk's and the products that you provide and you make?
Yeah. I think from a Novo Nordisk point of view, sustainability is very much about the way that we act. It is about ensuring that the materials that we consume, or the energy that we have, of course, to supply all our plants, etc., that we do this in a sound, environmentally way, meaning that we should not, or we should ensure that we don't compromise future generations from access to all the materials that we use today, whether that's energy or raw materials for our chemical production or all our products which is made out of plastic, etc. So I think we need to apply a much more sound mindset around how do we consume and what is that we actually leave behind when we've been there.
And why? What's the business? I mean, you're a business. What's the business case for sustainability? What's the value that sustainability can bring to patients, to your employees, to the market, to the company? How do you think about it in a business context?
Thank you very much for this question. That's a somewhat tough one. I think so. Why do we do this as a corporation in Novo Nordisk, and what's behind? First of all, I again think this is very much about in the future. It's about reputation. It is about a growing demand among our patients. It's about growing demand about payers. We strongly believe that in the future, unless you behave in an environmentally friendly way, we might not be able to sell our products. We might not be able to make the right contracts with all the different payers for instance, in the United States. And this applies across the globe. So it might not be priority number one today, but we believe with all the environmental challenges that we have today and all the climate changes that we all talk about, climate changes being, of course, hurricanes and whatnot, but it's not just about CO2 reductions and building parks with windmills and whatnot. It is also about the physical material that we use and what do we leave behind. And we simply do not believe that we're running a sustainable business if we leave too much waste in the landfills once we have delivered our products to our customers.
And are there costs to not addressing sustainability, to not really focusing and prioritizing issues around the environmental impact that the company has?
I think there are costs no matter what we do, because if we don't do anything, of course we save on the short term or on the short horizon. But I believe that requirements, as I mentioned, from politicians, from authorities, from payers, etc., will over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years, these requirements will change. So there will be a requirement for documentation in the way that we actually manage our business. So of course we can save money short term, but then we will lose, I think, on the business side longer term. Then if we spend money right now, then I'm pretty sure that we can stay in the game. And we can also pave the way. And imagine, we are a global company. We have, of course, a huge impact across the globe. And if we are, to deliver this company to our next generation, if we are to ensure that we can do this with confidence, then we shouldn't just leave all the different kind of products in landfills all over the world, knowing that these products they'll keep there, they will stay there. What we produce today, and if we like a plastic bottle like this or one of our pens, if we throw that into the landfill, we can find it again in 40 years from now. And we do not believe that this is a sustainable way to drive the business.
You have the company's made a pretty big commitment to sustainability. You've got something called Circularity for Zero.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is, and also so what is that, and how did that happen? Was it just a top-down thing from leadership? Was it outside pressure? What's the genesis of this?
Well, environmental concerns and environmental strategy is not completely new to Novo Nordisk. We have had what we call the so-called triple bottom line for 20 years plus in the company, where we on an annual basis report, of course, on the financials, but also on our social responsibility, and then not least on our environmental responsibility. And we have had an environmental strategy for many, many years. We then did a discussion. We did start or initiate a discussion last year in upper management about, is the strategy, is it up to date basically? Is this reflecting the challenges that we have ahead of us? I think 10 years back in time, we were very focused on, trying to reduce CO2 emissions. And we made contracts across the globe about providing, wind energy to all our manufacturing plants. But this is what I think lots of people today consider as rather low-hanging fruits. But what about all the transportation of our goods across the globe? What about, again, all the raw materials that we use, all the products that we produce? This is not about CO2 emissions only. This is also about the raw materials. So we did have this triple bottom line for many years. And then, in 2018, we did initiate the next round or the next version of our environmental strategy. And that's where we came up with this Circular for Zero. And we did put together some targets, and that was, of course, agreed upon in upper management that this is the way forward. So we have some targets for, we would like in 2030, that's where we would like to manage a business under the theme of zero environmental impact.
Zero environmental impact, essentially 10 years from now.
Yes, 10 years from now.
So you have a big job ahead of you.
I think that's somewhat of an undertaking to reach that. Even though people could argue that, 10 years that's a long time, but I think working in a heavily regulated industry as pharmaceuticals with regulatory requirements, makes it slightly more difficult sometimes just to change from one day to another. In the case of Novo Nordisk, we have, for instance, we have these plastic pens that we provide, all these pen injectors for our diabetes patients, and these pens are, not something which we can just change tomorrow. Ideally, they were made out of bamboo or some other kinds of bio-based materials, but of course, we have a priority which is safety first, and then of course accuracy for the patient. As long as we have to live up to these requirements, it's a tough challenge for us to find what are the next version of these pen injectors and how can we convert them into ideally something which is much more based on renewable resources, not plastic which is based on fossil fuels, and something which you ideally just could kind of throw out in nature and then will just degrade like biodegradable materials. But we don't have all the answers today, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're here.
That's why you're here. So let's talk more about the pen. You mentioned to me that there's I don't know how many different materials in the pen, but there's multiple types of plastic, there's metal, there's glass, there's...
Yes, that obviously makes the challenge even bigger, because if this was just one sort of plastic, yes, then we could maybe, try to implement a kind of take-back solution. But, the matter of the fact is that what we have here, we have, different, first of all, a number of different types of plastic. We have a cartridge inside, we have a rubber plunger inside, and we have a small piece of metal as well. And then there might be even a few or some medicine left in the cartridge. So how to recycle that? We would like ideally to design that for recyclability, but we can maybe not just do that on the very short horizon. So another initiative is, how can we recollect these pens? Can we make or can we institute different programs so that people can either return them or deliver them back to the pharmacy? And how can we get these pens back? Not necessarily to us as a company, but because we're not the only one who has this challenge, I believe. So if we can make this maybe together with other companies, together with the local municipality, how can we recollect this and then find hopefully sustainable, sound businesses that could reuse the plastic, because it's actually plastic of a fairly high quality. So,
I hope so.
Yeah, it is. It is. So that's another way, at least trying to see how can we recycle and reuse the materials again.
Yeah, kind of like when you have a printer at home and they ship you the ink cartridges and they give you a bag and you ship them back.
Yeah. Exactly. That could be. I think lots of clothing companies today, they have all these return systems. So when you receive something, is it the wrong size or whatever, it's very easy for you as a customer or as a patient, in our case, just to return this. You know, and next time, you know, the delivery service is there, you can maybe just, you know, hand back the old or the used pens, for instance.
Yeah. So that thing, that device,
Yeah.
is very closely regulated.
It's very closely regulated. Yeah.
And you're talking about, you know, 10 years from now having zero environmental impact.
Yeah.
Talk a little, well, a couple questions. So one is, can you characterize the scale of, what are the numbers that we're talking about? Are there, you know, 6 of these pens that go out a year? Are there, you know, what does that look like? What are some other numbers that you are looking at as a company as your baseline and saying 10 years from now, these are the key targets that we need to reduce? And then talk about that in the context of a heavily regulated medical device that isn't, as you said, it's not as simple as, there's a patient safety component, obviously, so you know, bamboo maybe is more flexible or something, you can't, you know, just swap the materials out. But even if you find a material that you think is better for the environment, you still have to go through a significant regulatory process in order to get that out into the market.
That's for sure right. First of all, you know, the magnitude of the challenge that we have ahead of us is, in terms of these pens, you know, the fact is that we produce today 1,000 pens every minute.
Every minute?
Every minute, you know, 24/7. 24/7, 1,000 pens per minute. And, you know, where do they end? Do they end up in landfills across the United States, across China, across Europe, Japan, whatever? And they mostly do. So that's just to put the number in perspective. So we are talking a massive amount of devices.
I want to pull out my calculator and multiply that by 60 and 24 and 365.
Yeah.
What does that come out to
That's
per
about
year?
500 million pieces per year.
500 million pens per year.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge.
So yeah, it's a big challenge, and that's also why we believe as a company that you know, first of all, we have an obligation, I think, to operate in society, also to take initiatives like that. And that's, of course, due to the fact that we have impact. You know, we can really impact that across. And we're not the only industry. We're not the only pharmaceutical company who provides pen injectors or similar devices. So that's also why, as I alluded to before, I think we should rather collaborate. We should not just try to find a dedicated Novo Nordisk solution. But, of course, that said, you know, from our perspective, if we are to change this to more environmentally friendly materials, this is of course what applies to us, and that's where, of course, we are trying to focus as well. And what does it take from a regulatory point of view, as you mentioned? You know, that really depends on how much we change the pen. If you could identify a more environmentally friendly product which could substitute the cap of this, for instance, you know, one-to-one with no further changes, of course it would be, I think, pretty easy from a regulatory point of view. But the fact is that, you know, most materials have other properties, mechanical properties. They are maybe less or more prone to humidity and whatnot. So if we are to change, we have to document, and then we have to go through all the documentation which is required from an authority point of view. And that means, to be very precise, it's the entire, you know, safety risk management process and design control and whatnot, where we have to document everything from a safety and an accuracy point of view. We might even, you know, if you change the design of the pen, you need to go through human factors and testing and whatnot to document that even the patients can manage the new pen, if you change the size and whatnot. So this is of course some of the boundary conditions that we have to operate within, and this is of course the challenge. But you know, again, you know, that's one of the reasons why we're here. That's to reach out to the greater society to help us identify solutions to these challenges.
It's very ambitious. Do you, I assume you also have targets around water and power and, you know, things that, you know, after describing that, it seemed like, oh, that must be easy to solve these other environmental issues.
Well, glad that you do ask me about this, because from a company point of view, you know, it's not just about these devices. From a company point of view, we have these, I think, 3 initiatives. You know, first of all, we're very focused on the supply. You know, what do we get from all our suppliers? So this is not about just exporting, you know, issues or challenges or problems to suppliers. So of course we're very focused on also sustainable supply. We are focused on our products, just shown here, and then we are very focused on the company and what is the culture needed in the company to embrace this. How do we talk about sustainability? How do we train people in the company? How do we not necessarily convince them, but how do we introduce the future mindset that we would like in the organization once you start designing new products for the future? And new products is not just pen injectors. It's also when we invent new drugs. It goes all the way through the value chain. What are the chemicals used? How much water do we need? What are the processes? How can we optimize to reduce water consumption? How can we reprocess and reuse, water in our systems, or ethanol and whatnot? Some of these chemicals or raw materials that we use in very high volumes. That's of course where it makes sense. So I think this is a mindset, and what we have done, in at least in our part of the organization, to work with this, we made this small design guideline here, which we did make in the spring. This is the design guideline which goes through lots of the processes that we have in the company. How to design a device, what do you need to take into consideration, how do we design this for circularity, how do we design this for, what is the time it needs to be in the market? Do we design a product to last for a month, or do we design a product to last for, let's say, 3 years? What sorts of materials do we use, and what is the requirement in terms of reliability and resistance and whatnot? So we have a number of parameters, which is well described here. We have examples and so forth. And this is simply, to start this not exercise, but to start this movement basically in the company, to get the right mindset on board. So design guidelines, one thing. We have also
and these guidelines
Yeah.
are that is it, and what happens? Is it just something you put on your internal
shelf.
website? Yeah, put on the shelf, or what?
Yeah, I think that's another good question, because we all know that kind of strategy is important, but implementation is really, or execution is vital. And in this case, it is about execution, of course, of this new environmental strategy, and how do we do this, and to avoid that this just ends up on the shelf. We are hosting what we call sustainability schools. We are training every employee in my own organization about these principles for the employees to get to learn this. What is it we mean when we in management and at the corporate level even have decided, this is the environmental strategy for Novo Nordisk. These are our goal ambitions for the future. And if you then, dribble that down in the organization, what does it mean in our part of the organization? So that's why we made this guideline, and of course, with lots of I think loose frames in terms of how can we overcome this, because we don't have all the answers. But again, providing the right schools and the right training sessions, really to educate people in this, because this is a different mindset that some of our, I think, very experienced engineers have been used to in the past, let's say, 25 years.
Yeah, you really need to change the culture of your organization to have people thinking about, at every step of the process, how they can address the environmental concerns.
Yes.
So are there other companies, whether they're in life sciences or not, that you look at their sustainability efforts and you think they're doing a good job? And
yes. Well, we're a Danish-based company, and of course we know that lots of companies are focusing on this today. Of course, with a different degree, whether or not they are in Denmark or Europe or in the United States or in India. But at least in Denmark, we have a few, which I think are well-known companies, one being Lego, and I assume that most of you know Lego. And that's a company where, basically what they produce and what they sell is plastic. And then you can argue, okay, from a sustainability point of view, how sustainable is that? Of course, as long as I think most people keep this for generations, because it's of such a high quality that you can just launched a few weeks ago. But they also already have instituted one example of a more sustainable solution. That's when you buy these six packs. They are not wrapped in plastic anymore. They've just glued these cans together, a small piece of glue to avoid the plastic and to avoid that the plastic ends up in the wrong place.
I hope the plastic bottles work better than the paper straws, because the paper straws drive me crazy. But
Yeah.
but anyway, so these are two Danish companies. An example, Novo Nordisk is a Danish company. Is the structure? I mean, you didn't mention this, but Novo Nordisk is really owned by a foundation. Does that factor in at all? Do you think, or does it make it easier for you as a company to really commit to environmental sustainability, or is it not relevant?
I don't think it necessarily makes it easier. But I think, in all what we make of decisions in top management in Novo Nordisk, knowing that even though we are a public listed company today, but we have a foundation which sits on 50% of the voting shares. That's of course kind of make the foundation that we are here for the very long term, and we are not here for very short-sighted solutions. So of course, when we make these bold plans, we also know that we have the kind of the backup among our owners. But that said, I think it's rather a general movement. I think not just in Denmark, but also in Europe, and I even see it pops up also in the United States today. About future environmental concerns, whether or not that's due to changes in the climate, or just the fact that we consume and consume and consume. And if you keep consuming what we do today, we are running out of materials, and we are running out of raw materials. Maybe not for bricks and mortar, but then maybe for plastic or other more specialized metals and whatnot in the future. So we have to rethink, not just within pharmaceuticals, but of course within electronics and whatnot. I think that's the exact same challenge.
So tell us about the innovation challenge.
Yes. Now that I already have told you that we don't have all the solutions, to be very concrete, we have of course tons of challenges in the company. One being these pens, but other challenges in our manufacturing plants, and how do you transform a sales affiliate into a more green affiliate? Should they convert all the cars with bicycles, or that's maybe not the solution, but how do they also try to think in a more environmentally friendly way? And there are tons of initiatives, but in our case, and what we have, because we are the ones, we are making all the products which ends up in the hands of our patients. So they all go through the device organization at the end of the day. I.e., we have of course major impact on what is that ends in the hands of the patient, and where does this end once you have emptied the pen. And that's why this idea came up with why not try to host this innovation challenge, because we don't have all the answers. Even though I think we are lots of bright people in our organization, the brain power and the brain trust across the globe is of course manyfold higher than what we have. So why should we, as the only one, come up with all the solutions? So that's why we are rather spreading the word, and we are reaching out to the greater society to ask for solutions for some of the challenges that we have. That could be a challenge for how to design that for of course circularity and potential reuse, and how could we maybe design programs so that it becomes very easy for the patient to hand it back to someone, not necessarily us, but maybe another company who could take care of this and make sure that we can reuse or put this in a more recycle environment. So that's why we are calling for action, and that's also why we are collaborating with you.
So you're open to, essentially the problem is you have 500 million of these things that you make every year, and they end up in landfills.
The majority does.
The majority do. And although not in Denmark, I understand.
No, that's right. In Denmark, we actually burn all our waste.
Everything.
Yes, of course not. If you tear down your old house, we don't burn the bricks. But from your household and whatever, all what can be burned is being burned. And that's something which we did, I think, establish, let's say, 30 years ago. And then we convert all the heat generated into central heating systems. So that's a model that we made many years ago. Right now, we are debating whether or not all the CO2 emissions from these plants, is that the healthy way going forward? Maybe not. And even though you burn the materials, then we still consume. So, again, this mindset about we should not just consume and then burn it or get rid of it. We should try to think in a more recyclable way. And how can we reuse materials? bio-based materials, for instance, something which you can cut the tree, but you can then plant a new one, and then it might take 20, 40, 50 years, but then just a matter of time, then you have a new tree.
So are there, so you're looking for solutions that can take 500 million pens and make the environmental impact of those zero.
Yes.
Are there specific types of technologies that you're looking for, specific types of services, or are you really open to anything from materials design to recycling programs to the whole gamut?
Well, I think we are open to basically everything. It's not designed to be very specific on a technology. It's not just designed to be something where we are seeking solutions for take-back solutions, for instance. You know, whatever idea that could improve the environmental footprint of these devices, that's something which we welcome. But of course, it's not a challenge where we are asking for a complete new types of device or a complete new design of, you could make a pen injector like this or like that. That's of course something which requires maybe somewhat more. But basically, whatever solution which could improve the footprint of these devices in the future, that's what we are interested in. But again, from a pure kind of recyclability point of view, but also about this program of how to recycle and how to take back these pens. How can we potentially make that?
So this is the second innovation challenge that we have done together. The first one was really focused on identifying and developing solutions to help improve diabetes management. And in both of these, in this current one and in that program that wrapped up earlier this year, you've chosen to look externally for ideas, for technologies, for co-development partners, rather than looking internally to develop the solutions yourselves. And arguably, nobody knows more about these pens and the materials, the process, than the people who work for Novo Nordisk. So what's the impetus for looking externally?
I think if you don't know, but we were running an innovation competition last year in Novo Nordisk together with Matter, and we actually did believe that it was very successful. So that's why we are collaborating once more now with a somewhat different theme. I think reaching out to the broader society is just it's not that I don't have trust in my own organization. I think we have really, really clever people who comes up with lots of innovative solutions. But again, in this area where we are not a master house or powerhouse of inventing new environmentally friendly materials. We have not been in that business for, that's not part of our legacy. We have not been in that business for many, many years. So this is also new to us. And instead of trying to work with this in our own offices and labs for, let's say, the next 10 years, why not boost it and then reach out to the greater society? Because I think we have a movement right now where lots of people at universities, they are focusing much more on, a more sustainable future. So, even though we have good engineers, and I'm sure they will come up with ideas which we already have seen, but why not also tap into the potential that is outside? So I think it's not to just to go externally, but it is the ideal combination of our legacy and also what's actually possible to change in these devices, given that we are in these under these regulatory frames. But what solutions are out there? Sometimes we might be too restricted in thinking out of the box, and sometimes people from outside, they are way too far from what is actually practical possible. But combining this, that's what we believe in.
And there's a trade-off, I think, or maybe you tell me if there's a trade-off, because you work with someone externally, and then if there's IP there, you don't necessarily own the IP. And how do you think about that as
Yes, thank you for asking this question, because that's one of the dilemmas that we have, of course. So how do we share this? When we do something internally, of course we are in full control. We own all the IP. But I think we have just made the decision. Okay, we are for discussion here. We are for sharing this. If it's not our IP, it's not our IP. Whether or not we can buy access to this or make a license agreement or whatever, I think we're just up for this, and then we'll just discuss and hopefully in a dialogue find a solution. So I think we are well aware about these dilemmas, but we are also well aware that we rather pursue these routes because we believe that at the end of the day, the benefits, they outweighs I think some of the restrictions or some of the potential downsides in terms of owning this or not. So we believe that the benefits they outweigh I think the challenges of getting access to external innovation.
Has there been, you've worked with a number of startups through the program that we did together. You've worked with startups previously. Novo Nordisk was a startup like 100 or so years ago. It's not a startup today. It's a very different type of an organization. Have there been things that have surprised you about the way that entrepreneurs operate or the interactions between startups and your colleagues or yourself and your colleagues at Novo Nordisk?
I think we are extremely fast in Novo Nordisk, and I think we can, we are agile and whatnot. But still, what really strikes me when we work with these startups is the fact that, the time it takes from idea to action is very short, and actually shorter than you believe sometimes. So I think that's what really fascinates me. Secondly, I also think what we see when we collaborate with startups, that's the passion, the passion and the engagement is just phenomenal. And that's what really drives, I think, these startup companies to bring solutions to the market and do it fast. And I think this is something which I think for us sometimes is a challenge that we have internally. We have, once you are a large corporation, of course you have processes, you have governance structures and decision bodies. And that's what we're trying to overcome these years. We are actually doing a lot in the company to be as fast and as agile to respond to these external trends and movements, but also the fact that we are collaborating with many smaller companies today, not just in the device space, but also on the drug side. And we need, of course, to adapt to these companies, otherwise we will lose them. And that means, for instance, it's not just about an arm's length relation. It's not just about considering these startups or smaller companies as a supplier. It's about building a relation. It's about building a partnership with them. Because if we are to be successful, I at least believe that we rather have to co-develop. Because what we have on our side is often very complicated once you dig slightly deeper into this, because we have all these regulatory restrictions and quality requirements and whatnot, human factors, etc. And that's what some of these startups, they are not aware of. They don't know about what are the clinical practices, what are the regulatory route of this. And that's where we can, of course, provide advice and provide all the knowledge that we have, and that's what we can bring to the table. But we need to do this in a joint collaboration. So it's not just a supplier or vendor relation. It is this co-development about what we in this together.
So I think that is such an important point, and we have experience working with a lot of different companies, different organizations, and in our experience, there are some companies that ultimately view startups as another type of a vendor providing a particular solution, and there are others, like what you just described, where they view as a completely different type of entity. It's not just a smaller version of Deloitte or IBM. It's a potential co-development partner, and that is hard for a lot of companies to internalize and really operationalize. How have you been successful, and if so, how have you been able to do that?
I think we are learning as we speak. We have a long legacy in our company where we've been growing organically for years, and that goes for all our drugs, all our products, all our devices. We just did everything in-house. Right now we are moving into new therapy areas in the company, and we need much more, or we need many more other concepts than we've had in the past. So we cannot just build on the legacy, and you can either then try to build it all up on your own. That will take yet another 10, 15 years to build up a new therapy area, or you could try to tap into the broader environment of biotech companies and startup companies, and we have decided the latter. So we also have lots of learnings, of course. It's not always as easy as you and I are just discussing here, and we should just do like this, and then it works perfectly well. That's far from the reality. So of course we have some learnings, and some of them are maybe not the most ideal one, where we have had issues between us and a potential, what we may be considered being a vendor, but where we have realized, okay, if we are to be successful, we have to move together in the same boat, and to do this as a co-development exercise, rather than trying to hand over, this is the specification, please provide, and then just call us once you have done the job. So we have some, of course, I have a few scars in my back from some of these past experiences, and that's from where we learn, and that's just the reality. But I think we have learned so much today that we are well aware that we really have to make up our mind before what is that we would like with this collaboration here, or this partnership. If we are engaged on both sides, then I think we can become successful. Otherwise, not. In terms of IP, you mentioned this about we don't own this, and how do we come around this? What we have experienced is also that once we are approaching some of these, or one of these smaller companies, sometimes they tend to be a little afraid, because okay, if this is let's say a two-man company or four-man company, and then they are afraid that all of a sudden we are just stealing their idea, and if we get too close, then we can just see what are the secrets, and then all of a sudden we'll just invent around that. I don't believe that's a sustainable way, even though I think they are of course concerned that we are this big company with tons of money, we can just hire in all the necessary lawyers and whatnot. But that's at least not our way of, and that's not our part of our mindset, I think, in driving the company. Of course, we do need to have mutual respect for what we do and what others do, and of course, if this is an IP which belongs to someone else, of course we have to respect that. Otherwise, we'll never ever succeed. And if we have too many, I believe, if we have too many cases where we are trying to steal others' ideas, I think rumors will just walk around, and nobody would like to collaborate.
So you don't want that reputation.
Yeah, no, we do not. We do not. But I see this, and I of course fully understand. If just me and you made a great idea and went to the huge global pharmaceutical company or whatever, then of course they could just, if we have to pitch our idea, and then all of a sudden they see all the secrets, and how well patented is our idea, and how strong is the IP. Of course we could be concerned that okay, they say thank you, but no thank you, and then they start on their own to copy our idea. That's of course I think a concern that we have seen. That did surprise me a little bit, but I also did try to understand why do they react as they do, and of course I could also understand their concern, not knowing a company like ours, for instance.
And what do you think the startups who you've worked with, what do you think they would say has been the experience of working with Novo Nordisk?
I know for a fact that they have been surprised in the sense that first of all, I think the effort that we put behind these collaborations, I think the knowledge that we have, the skill sets that we have, and I think all the effort that we and all the resources that we did put into, for instance, the former competition or the former challenge. It was not just about hiring in you, for instance, and then please take care of everything and provide us with a list at the end of the day with finalist number 1, 2, and 3, and then we can meet them. The fact that we were already from the beginning, we did appoint a number of mentors in the company. So we did appoint, individual engineers or people from our commercial organization, who of course was in this area of devices. We did appoint them, to specific startup companies or these applicants to ensure that we provide them with the necessary information about our company, our requirements, our thoughts, and to act or to provide them with sparing about what are the processes in big pharma, what do I need to be aware of, etc. So I think they have been surprised to see the effort that we did put behind.
And have these challenges and working with startups, do you think they've done anything to alter the mindset of of Novo Nordisk, of individuals within the company?
I think so, for sure. We have of course kind of branded these activities, and we have brand them across the company, even though these are very dedicated, these activities are very dedicated to what we, of course, are responsible for from a company perspective. I think we're not the only one who's facing challenges along different dimensions. And this, I think this has actually provided inspiration for some of my colleagues who has now initiated similar exercises, but in very different parts of the organization. So I think this mindset around or about externalization, now we can discuss whether that's another company, a provider, or it's a startup company, but just the fact that, externalization is part of our future business model. We cannot just grow in our own or keep growing in our own kind of ivory tower. We need to reach out and to collaborate.
And do you think you mentioned the mentors in the last program? There were people from Novo Nordisk who were assigned to each of the companies, and they spent, especially with the 5 companies that we had about a 4-month program with, they spent a lot of time with those companies over.
Yeah, we did. And that's also why we did spend some time before we actually initiated the first innovation challenge, because as I mentioned before, there is no such thing as just writing a contract with a company to provide these candidates, and that's it. And then at the end of the day, we'll just have a meeting in a small steering group and deciding which to look further into, because I think they don't believe in that model. And exactly as I mentioned before, once we have someone we would like to collaborate with, we need to collaborate in a very, I think, in a very, not necessarily tight, but in a very combined way where we share targets, we share plans, we co-develop, and we have all these mutual exchange, or this exchange of data between us. We are providing insights into our pipeline and the broader perspective from our business point of view. I think that's what we believe is a future model of collaborating with these startups. And likewise, running a challenge like this, I think that's, it's the exact same. If we are to get the right insight among all the applicants and to get to know, all their ideas and thoughts behind, it's very difficult to filter this all the way through you or another company or another provider, knowing that what we get back is also ultimately what we are searching for or seeking. So I think the more energy, it's like signing up for a course at university. The more you prepare, the more you engage, the more you learn, and the wiser you get. And I think it's very much about the same here. So even though it comes at an investment, but I believe it pays off at the end.
Do you think have people who have spent the most time working with startups, do you see them operating in any different kind of a way? Do they function any differently?
I don't know if you can see, Steve walking different down the aisle today in the office or behaving differently. But I think what I see is an even broader interest and a broader acceptance that in the organization that we have to consider the environment and all the businesses outside our own, and we rather have to co-create and co-develop solutions for the future than just trying to sit within. And this is also driven by the fact that, in the good old days when we were making pens, these pens were purely mechanical. And these products was purely mechanical. But today we are, and that goes all the way from the drug development side, with which we of course collaborate, but we have many more different shapes and forms and formats of our drugs coming in the future. So the primary packaging material and some of these device-drug interactions are becoming much closer. So we are moving towards much more integrated product development. We are providing digital solutions on top of our products today. So this is about providing connectivity to these solutions. It's about collaborating with a cloud vendor, an app provider, etc. And all of a sudden it becomes a somewhat more difficult, or not difficult, but a somewhat broader audience of suppliers, because we are not the ones who can provide the ecosystem and the cloud solution and all the electronic pieces which is needed for connectivity, and then also the pen and the mechanics and the drug. So in the past it was maybe more simple, or it was more simple, but in the future it's much more integrated, and that of course again calls for, I think, collaboration.
By the way, your pens today, that pen doesn't have a digital component to it, but in the future,
Yeah.
the pens, they do, and you've got caps and the different configurations.
Yeah.
That's going to make the environmental issue. There's batteries. It makes it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The challenges, they keep coming.
Yeah.
Because it's no secret that these pens are going to be connected, and we will already we have the first connected pen entering the market here in the spring next year. That's a Gerbil Pen. This is a pre-filled disposable pen, but we have Gerbil pens which are supposed to last for 3 to 5 years. But these pens here, which are by far the majority of all what we sell today, we have accessories that we can add on top of this, which is of course comprising electronics and batteries and antennas and whatnot. So that's maybe on one hand easier to handle, but again it's something which needs to be disassembled at a point in time. But we even have more integrated solutions in the future. So talking about a challenge where we have plastic and glass and a rubber plunger in this small cartridge inside, but in the future we might also have batteries and small pieces of electronics. So internally we are already trying to see how can we design this for easy disassembly, so that when we either recollect them, they are very easy to recollect and to disassembly in the right fractions. But it is, to be honest, it is yet another challenge which comes on top of what we already have, and it is something which we are very well aware of. And that said, it's not all batteries which are equally toxic or dangerous from an environment, but of course it's not something which we would like to leave behind. So that is right.
So some of the questions from the audience, going back to your environmental goals, how are you tracking progress, or how will you be tracking progress against your environmental goals? Is there and are you publicly reporting as you march towards 2030? Is it just an internal thing? How's the company thinking that through?
That's a very good question, and that's a question which we have discussed a lot. One thing being, if we are to put some targets out there in the future, which we have now, we have this target for 2030. We believe that that's a bold target, but what we don't know is the exact route to reach that. So i.e. we don't have a very granular plan to track every quarter, every year, these are the KPIs, these are the milestones. To be honest, we don't have that in place right now. Of course, we are looking into different initiatives and how can we in any way track this, but just to be very open and honest, we don't have an exact plan somewhere in our drawers and whatnot. This is something which we have to invent along or on the fly. We know, of course, the final target at the end, but
0.
Yes, but again, how do we measure that?
Yeah.
We are working together with other institutions about how do people define what is zero? How do we define sustainability? How do we really define what is 100% sustainable? What is renewable? What when you recycle and when you make your calculations, you then also include all your sub-suppliers and their sub-suppliers and the energy consumed to produce that machinery and et cetera, et cetera. How do we make all these calculations? It's maybe easier said than done, but we are collaborating with I think it's the Ellen MacArthur Institution about these principles as well.
Yeah, and you said something earlier that I hadn't thought about, but you think about it's not just the pens, it's not just the amount of water that you consume or the power. If you take it down to the sort of micro level, you've got, and you mentioned sales reps on bicycles. You've got thousands of sales reps and business development executives driving around, and so there's really a number of different areas where you need to focus on improving environmental performance.
Yes, and I think we did begin. Actually, more than 10 years ago, we made the first contract with a local power supplier, electricity supplier in Denmark, and made contracts that they would put up some big wind parks, and then we could buy electricity from there to make sure that this was from a sustainable source. But that was maybe what you today would consider as somewhat low-hanging fruit. But how do we convert? Once I sit on an airplane, we cannot just buy this windmill. They cannot just provide the electricity or the power that is consumed out there. That is, of course, fuel. So how do we come around that? And what about all our cars? Of course, we have an ambition to maybe to change that to more environmentally friendly cars, like electric cars, for instance, or hybrid cars. But again, it's not just something which we can do immediately tomorrow. And now we are kind of, I think our CEO is spreading the word. So it's of course challenges which are, impacting almost everything in the entire value chain. So we are not the only one, but we are at least one of the one who ends up providing these products in the hand of all the patients. So we of course have major impact on what is left behind. Also because it's pretty difficult to control where does all these devices end up. Whereas I think it's maybe under somewhat more control where do you deliver your old car and your used car, and we have all our internal processes and waste channels and whatnot. We have this in control. But once we kind of hand it out to our patients, all of a sudden it's not in our control. But it's to some extent still our responsibility.
And this is another question here related to that: is how much of the burden of sustainability do you anticipate will be placed on end users, and will there be changes in workflow, workload, and user process? Do you have a sense yet of?
I strongly believe that we can't add any further burden to the patient. So, whatever we do of initiatives, we should never ever add to the daily burden of managing a chronic disease. So, putting the patient in the center of all what we do, if we have to design solutions which makes it at least as easy for them, or even easier than managing the disease today. So we cannot put any responsibility on them as such. Of course, if they have to hand back these pens or whatever, that's maybe an easy choice. But we cannot ask them to start disassembling all these parts and send them left, right, and center, and etc.
Somebody wants to know: is this design guide available?
Yes, it is actually. For those of you who would like to seek great inspiration, you can find this on the Innovation Challenge homepage that we have set up, this Novo Nordisk Innovation Challenge.com. That's where you can find this. I don't have handouts for all of you, but you can actually download a PDF file with a copy of this if you would like to seek inspiration about the targets that we have put in place and how we actually design around this and how we do expect to work with this in the future in our design development processes, where we design for circularity and reuse and the right choice of materials and etc.
We're going to take a 15-minute break. Kenneth will be joined by two of his colleagues, and we'll dig much more into the details of the challenge. There's a number of questions that people ask that are related specifically to the challenge, and we'll cover those in the next session. So if you're watching the live stream or you're here, feel free to do whatever you want for 15 minutes, and we'll be back at that point. And in the interim, on behalf of Matter and the Green Innovation Group, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. This was a pleasure. think we'll move on and we can get everyone seated. Yeah, we have a number of questions, and now I have Andrea here with me, and we'll maybe start going through some of the more specifics around the challenge, and then we have some questions from you, and if you have more questions, just pass them on.
Yep. Well, so thanks a lot for being here. So my name is Andrea. I'm just gonna go through some of the details of the program, so you guys are a little more informed about what we are looking into and what are the deadlines for application and what is the timeline for the overall program. So the topic of this year, Novo Nordisk Innovation Challenge, is help us transform into the circular economy. And what we are specifically targeting are two aspects. The first is the circular design, as Kenneth mentioned, and how might we design products, packaging, and processes that are fit for circularity. And we're looking at making these devices here fit for circularity. We're exploring the possibility of challenging the lifetime expectancy of a product like this. We're challenging the materials that we are trying to use for making our products. We're taking in consideration the production process. So can we consume less material? Can we design them in a way that consumes less material? And last but not least, can we design them recycled? And the second part, which is the recycling, and as Kenneth mentioned, is once these devices end up in the hands of the patient, how can we design processes that are patient-centric, but allows us to do something with the pens and recollect them and put them again into the circular economy. So can we reuse some of the materials? For example, can we reuse the cap and apply it to new pens in the future? And so can we design take-back solutions that allow to do that? Or can we just recycle the materials? In terms of process, we have launched the program about 3 weeks ago. I'm happy to report that we have about 20 applications already. So that's we are going to have the application open until December 13th. So you have about 5 weeks more to apply if you wish to apply. We are going to then spend December to select the top candidates that we want to invite for a virtual pitch event, where a selection committee from Novo Nordisk will evaluate which are the top candidates. We're seeking about 3 to 5 startups that will be able to collaborate with us. And throughout January to April next year, we're going to run a 12 weeks accelerator program, where some of the activities will be in Copenhagen at our premises, where you get a chance to meet the mentors, meet our people, and get a lot of exchange of information to then work throughout the program to find ways to partnering with us and piloting some initiatives. And then we'll end up in April 23rd with a demo day event, which is going to be again held in Copenhagen. And we're going to be a big public event there where we're going to declare a winner of the competition, which of course it's something that has some value for the startups. We're talking about 25,000 euro. And hopefully after that, then we'll progress our piloting activities with the startups. So that's basically the program, how it's structured. Please do apply now if you're interested, or if you know anyone in your network, just forward this information. We saw that tagging people on LinkedIn is actually one of the most viral ways of having people applying. And if you look for any information, just further that Novo Nordisk Innovation Challenge.com. You'll find there all the information that you need. You'll find the PDF version of this circular mini guideline, and also the information on how we track what are we looking for in terms of when we speak about circularity. I can't remember whether I have to leave this one or the next one. Oh, this one. Yeah. So if you have any questions, please do submit them there. We have the iPad here where we can have a look. And yeah, shall we? I'll maybe ask you a question.
Yeah.
So there are reusable plastic options today with many products. Would it make sense to make these pens from reusable plastic?
That's of course a very good question. We are of course looking into this already now. What kind of grade of reusable plastic can we identify today and can we buy today? Because of course we have very high requirements for our plastic today. That's also why it's a decent material to recycle. One of the challenges I think in the industry today is that when you recollect all different types of plastic, you end up blending all of this together, and then you end up with a recyclable product which is of a very low grade. So we are still on the look for finding something which is a pharma grade, or which is at least up until today is of such a quality that we can substitute what we already have. So we haven't implemented that already now. What we are also looking into is I think worth mentioning here, that's bioplastic, because we can exchange some of the plastic in our pens already from kind of ordinary plastic based on fossil fuels into what we call bioplastic. Bioplastic is still plastic, but the source is not fossil fuels, but the source comes from organic materials. So that's at least one initiative that we also look into. But for sure, we will look much more into the recycled parts as well.
Thanks. We have another question about, can a team of innovators apply for this challenge, or does it have to be a startup? That's a really great question. This year we're targeting startups that have reached a maturity stage that help us start collaborating towards a pilot. So although we welcome any application because we are in the lookout of knowing what's out there that we could potentially implement down the line in a few years, we're really working towards piloting some initiatives with the startups that enter the competition. So I hope I answered the question here to say, team of innovators, yes, but as long as you have developed something that can be piloted with a corporation like ours. And feel free to raise a hand if you have a question from the audience here. I don't know if you, do we have any? No, we don't have any microphone here. Oh, yeah.
Do we have a question?
Okay. Thank you. Last week, University College of London announced that they want to get rid from plastic in research, which is a huge amount, and they don't have a clear idea yet how they will do it, but they say perhaps they will wash it, like we'll use glass dishes and we'll wash it. That it's basically going back 30 years back, that we already was at that stage. So it's speaking about injection device, 30 years ago was a glass syringe that people just boiled for 15 minutes, sterilized, and then injection ampoules was distributed, and it can be environmentally very friendly, right? Because it disposes just piece of glass. So what is your view about going back into the future, returning to those reusable devices?
Yeah, a good question. Thank you for that. I think there are, first of all, there is a dimension on the research side. I think also when you're talking hospital setting and whatnot, in hospitals and in our own drug research today, they consume a large amount of single-use plastic. You have lots of different equipment in a lab, which is single-use today, and that serves a great purpose that it's maybe sterile when you kind of unpack it, and it's easy to use, and you don't have to bother about cleaning processes and whatnot to ensure that it's completely sterile next time. And that's of course a challenge today. It was not a challenge when these solutions were invented. They were rather a great benefit. So, but that's at least one area that I know someone is looking into right now, because we're not, we won't like to take step backwards in terms of innovation and quality and ease of use and whatnot. But that's what someone is dealing with out of my area. But in terms of these devices, I actually think that we have good alternatives, and they are not necessarily old-fashioned, because these one are made, I think, from a convenience point of view. It's just a new pen every time, or every week, every month, and then you can throw it out and bring in a new one. Inside we still have a glass cartridge, and we are supposed to continue to do so. You can also make devices durable, devices which can last for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years maybe, where you of course exchange the cartridge once it's empty. These devices are not in any way, I believe, old-fashioned. They are of course somewhat more expensive. So you will need to have another reimbursement model, because who's supposed to pay for the device, who's supposed to pay for the drug, and there are just different, I think, reimbursement schemes today applying in different countries, which is at least some of the reasons why we have the split between durable and disposable devices today. But I'm pretty sure that this is something which could be one of the solutions. We are right now discussing this quite a lot, but our entire business model is very much based on these pre-filled devices. Is that something which we should try to change in the future? What about our competitors? What about the ease of use? But I think we can make brilliant, also durable devices if that's what is being required or needed.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Oh, we have another question here from the audience.
Alexandra Barańczak, University of Chicago. So I believe that BMS introduced an injection pen not so long time ago that can be used up to 6 times. Can you speak to the difference between what you are looking for and why they can use that pen and
Yeah. That maybe requires a little more granularity in terms of the different pens. We have a large variety of pens. This is just to give you one example. These pen injectors are sometimes designed like this one for titration drugs. Insulin is a drug which you titrate. You change your dose size, let's say in the morning to lunchtime to evening time if you are type 1 diabetes patients, for instance. You have other treatment, other drugs which could be, we have a drug, a GLP-1 drug, which is not insulin, but this is a fixed dose. So that's where you have a device just providing basically a fixed dose. So this device can last for some patients 3 days, other patients maybe 10 days, other patients maybe 20 days, because you simply dial up here at the end what is the desired dose size. So this is a multiple use, you could argue, until you of course empty your cartridge. The ones you might refer to is more kind of fixed dose devices. These fixed dose devices they either contain just one dose or maybe even more shots, as you said. But I think this is just a matter of different design options, and I think we are also on our way with more fixed dose devices, and we of course also look into whether or not they are, one-off single shot and that's it, or if they can be at least used a number of times. Yeah. So it's very much about the therapy that you're going to administer. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks. Maybe I'll jump to one of the questions arriving here. So there is a question regarding the access to the marketing and commercialization efforts, or whether this is just an R&D initiatives. Maybe you can.
Yeah,
spend a
I think
couple
this is absolutely not just an R&D exercise. Of course, I think in R&D we should come up with the technical solutions as to how we can overcome some of these challenges. But it is as much about how do we enter the marketplace. What are the channels in which we sell our drugs and our products, and what are the different agreements and that we have made with different payers, and what is being reimbursed, what is not being reimbursed. So, we cannot just come up with a new solution which we think is ideal. We need, to thoroughly investigate that together with our commercial organization, and that's of course also what we do, because we have very different commercial models from country to country. It's absolutely not just one size fits all. So we do this in close collaboration and evaluate different initiatives and pricing and whatnot, whether it's daily, monthly, or
Yeah, thanks for that. And maybe on that note, I take another questions because somebody's asking for the second part of the challenge, which is basically how can we get the pens back and do something, recycle them. The question is this a global or local issue? And what are the challenges that we see? And as Kenneth is mentioning, one size does not fit all. So what could work in a country, and even in a huge country like US, what might work in a state might not work in another state, because some of the environmental legislations are at state level, for example, in US, and in other parts of the world, maybe you have the advantage that within a country you have the same regulation, so maybe you can compare a state to a country in that sense. But we're looking this from a global perspective, but of course we have to adapt to the singular countries where we're looking into. So it's a pretty complex exercise, I would say.
it is.
Good. There's a question about how you're interested in processes and packaging too. Yeah, to some extent. Of course, Kenneth mentioned that we produce a lot of them every year, so this is like probably one of the first burden. But we're definitely interested in seeing innovations that tackle like processes, how we produce them, and also how we pack them to send them around the world.
They of course end up in packaging made out of different types of carton.
Yeah.
And how to make that as environmentally friendly, and that goes for not just whether it's white and bleached carton. It's also about the ink which becomes on top of is it black and white, is it colored? And then again, one should bear in mind that there are requirements to the packaging. You need to test this so that if you drop the package, and that it actually keep the product safe inside and whatnot. So it's not just a piece of carton which you wrap around. There are also lots of requirements that we have to fulfill for these. But that's another area which is of course as relevant.
Good. I'm just skimming through the questions. We have a lot of questions coming in. I think there's a really interesting question actually for you, Kenneth. If the innovation challenge is successful, and we know it will, do you expect your competitors to adopt similar sustainable processes?
If what?
If we expect competitors to adopt similar sustainable processes.
I think that's purely guesswork. I have no insights into our competitors, what they do and what they don't do. I'm sure it's a matter of time before they will look into this. Not necessarily because we do it right now, but as I said, I think this is part of the future obligation for us as a company to manage a business and to be part of society. I think there will be requirements about what we provide and what we leave behind, basically. So I believe that sooner or later they will also look into this.
Yeah. Again, I have some questions regarding where can I get more information. Maybe I'll pop up the website again. Is Novo Nordisk innovationchallenge.com. You can also Google that, and you should be able to find the website pretty easily. And if you're in the room, you can just talk with us at the next coffee break. So if you want to have more information, just reach out to us. I'm just seeing whether we're skipping any major question here. Yeah, that's actually a really interesting question, Kenneth. Maybe you can spend a few words on that. Can you speak to some of the major parameters and regulations regarding the design and materials in these pens? So here we're talking about the regulatory framework.
Yeah, I think if we have the regulatory framework, and that's about the design control, it's about all the safety risk management and the human factors that we have to have in place. We also have different ISO certifications, so we also have to live up to these. Some of our devices are CE marked, and that's just another process that we have to live up to. but it's not something which is Novo Nordisk specific. It's just what I think applies to all pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah.
So,
But it's definitely something to keep in mind when coming up with some materials that are maybe coming from biosources, but they are not really made for such a use in
no,
medical.
and I think one good example is we just discussed the packaging. You know, it might be obvious to choose something which is recyclable carton, but then we already did look into this. I think last year, we're just scratching the surface. But if you are to use, reused and recycled fibers, then the wood fibers are shorter. They are not as strong as kind of native ones. So then you end up with a carton which is slightly thicker than if it's brand new. And then all this adds together. So it's not just a slam dunk again. It's not so easy to find right solutions. But it might be the most beneficial ones. But that's what one has to look into, because we have, as I mentioned, to be very specific, believe it or not, we have more than 100 requirements for these boxes that we have to take off today in order to live up to all the authorities' requirements for what we call kind of secondary packaging. So it's not that we can't make it. I'm sure we can, but it's not just a brown piece of paper and then a piece of paper and that's it. So, but we are very eager to look into this, and I'm sure there are more environmentally friendly solutions out there.
Yeah.
But this again is another example is what do you expect if you go to the pharmacy and pick up something? Do you expect to receive a package which is nice and white and clean, maybe with some branding on top, or would you like to receive something which is brownish? There are, at least in different countries, there are very different expectations what you receive at a pharmacy, and it's not in all countries where it would be acceptable to sell a product in a reused kind of a carton material where it looks brown. And if you have to paint it white and whatnot, then I think it's you don't gain anything from the environmental point of view, but it's just about perceptions and different cultures. So it's just to add yet another challenge to how to find global solutions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One size does not fit all.
Not necessarily.
Good. There's another question coming up still on if we're interested in process improvements, notions, or not just material design. And the answer is yes. So if you go on Novo Nordisk innovationchallenge.com, you will see what are the areas we're looking into, and one of them is the minimizing waste in production. So we're definitely looking into processes there. Where is there anything that we can do to minimize the waste? So, yeah, if you have any solutions, any technology that can help us in that area, so feel free to apply.
Yeah.
And
Maybe we are coming to an end.
I think we're coming to an end. I don't see many more questions. Well,
We have
there's one here.
It might be helpful to the audience to talk about what has been your greatest success to date in your innovation to change your culture, and also who were the partners that helped you do that?
I think our partners to do so. I assume you think about environment right now. I think what we already have accomplished is something which we have accomplished internally, because we haven't had any partners yet. But now we have brought in Matter to assist us in this challenge competition, or in this innovation challenge. I think that's the most important step for us, because even though we have lots of smaller projects cooking here and there, we don't have any solutions which we already have brought to the market yet. We have tons of good ideas, but they usually turn out to be slightly more difficult, really, to get into full implementation. So of course I think we have high expectations. So I think this is the first initiative where we really this is Big Bang, and we reach out to the broader global community. Yeah.
Good. Well, I think I can see any more questions coming here. So I think we can just wrap it up. If you have any question from the audience here, just reach us to us during the coffee break. Otherwise, go to Novo Nordisk innovationchallenge.com. You'll find all the information regarding the program, and there's also an email address where you can email us if you have any questions for something that's not covered on the website. But good. Well, thanks a lot to everyone. Thanks for Matter for hosting us this morning, and it's really great to see so many people.
Yeah, thanks for you. Thanks to all of you. Yeah.